After being humiliated at my son's party, I uncovered an incredible truth that changed everything. The air buzzed with laughter and joy as friends and family gathered to celebrate Liam's birthday. Jake, the proud mechanic, spent all week planning this moment, hanging streamers, baking cake, and grilling burgers that filled the backyard with a smoky aroma. But as the golden light of sunset wrapped around them, the contentment shattered. It was Brad, the shiny businessman next door, who struck the first blow. "Look at Jake slinging wrenches while the rest of us make real money," he sneered, laughter erupting from the group like an unwanted cloud raining on a sunny day. Jake felt heat creeping up his neck, embarrassment coiling in his gut. Echoes of their laughter ricocheted off the walls of his pride, dredging up insecurities that had haunted him for years. Was that all he amounted to? A simple mechanic scrapping by while Brad flaunted his wealth and success? The snickers mixed with the sweet perfume of cake, turning the festive atmosphere sour. Was this how the neighbor saw him, never measuring up? Haywire emotions flooded through him. Anger mingled with hurt, bearing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. He felt like a clown at his own son's party. He stepped away from the crowd, desperate to escape, only to find solace among grease-stained tools and motor oil in his garage. He rummaged through old boxes later, each cardboard flap instantly triggering a memory, but the real treasure passed him by, a flicker of resilience stirring within. He found photographs of a man he barely remembered, his grandfather, a once celebrated car designer whose legacy lay buried in family strife. That spark ignited Jake's determination. He wouldn't just rot in the shadow of Brad's mockery. Fueled by visions of glory past, he pored over crumpled blueprints, burning the midnight oil in pursuit of his own automotive creation. Weeks passed in a blur, the world outside fading. The scent of fresh sketches filled his lungs while he grapples with the weight of expectation, the need to honor his family's legacy pressed against the simmer of rage against Brad's disdain. Jake wondered if all this effort could matter, if it could shift his standing in a community that seemed dead set against him. The drawing board became his refuge, lines of possibility streaming through his mind with each stroke. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. But just as he began to feel ready to unveil his creation, reality slammed into him like an old tire rolling down a hill. A chance encounter with Brad in a diner set the stage for confrontation, tension crackling in the air like static electricity. How could he face the man who rendered him small in front of all those he loved? His stomach twisted with uncertainty. Was he strong enough to stand up, to carve his own identity from the remnants of mockery? Or would he crumble, allowing the weight of Brad's words to bury him once more? Jake's heart raced, thoughts spiraling. Should he confront the man or let the moment of confrontation slip away? The diner felt small, the weight of expectations filling the air as he clenched his fists. Stand your ground, Jake, he told himself, knowing that everything he believed about himself hung in the balance of this confrontation. Doubt not at him. Would the truth set him free or leave him devastated? The moment stretched, a taut rubber band ready to snap. Jake dragged his gaze across the diner, searching for a flicker of reassurance in the faces surrounding him, diners lost in their own worlds, unbothered by the duel brewing just a booth away. His heart thudded against his chest like an engine struggling to start. He felt every bead of sweat forming on his brow, a symphony of self-doubt escalating within. Would people see him differently after confronting Brad? Or would he simply be adding fuel to the fire? He imagined the scorn in Brad's eyes, the smugness of superiority radiating from that tailored suit. But this was more than just a personal confrontation. It was a chance to reclaim his identity, to redefine who he was, not only in the eyes of others, but in his own. The sketches he had poured himself into, night after night, whispered promises of potential that he could no longer ignore. "You can do this," he murmured to himself, fingers digging into the scratchy vinyl of the booth, anchoring him in the moment. They were words meant to ignite a flame of courage among the ashes of his confidence. As if in response to his thoughts, Brad turned slightly, his chocolate brown eyes locking onto Jake's for a fleeting second that felt like an eternity. In that flash, Jake let go of hesitation, a wave of determination pushing him forward. He couldn't continue to be Brad's shadow, a mere mechanic in the presence of a mighty businessman. Today was different. Today, he would expose the reality beneath the surface bravado. Jake stood, his resolve sharpening as he approached Brad's table. The diner's ambient noise faded into the background, transforming into a distant hum, and for the first time, every eye felt weighty, yet pivotal. He rehearsed what he wanted to say in his head, but the words felt inadequate against the enormity of the situation. Would telling Brad off really change anything? The shadow of self-doubt surged, poking at the edges of his resolve. But just as quickly, the memories of the sketches of his grandfather's legacy solidified his mission. "Brad," he said, forcing the word through clenched teeth, his heart pounding like a jackhammer, "we need to talk." His voice was firmer than he felt, steady despite the tempest swirling within. Brad looked up, his smirk faltering slightly as the gleam in his eyes transformed into vague curiosity. "Oh, really, Jake," Brad replied, his tone dripping with condescension. "What could a mechanic possibly say that I haven't heard before?" Each syllable struck Jake like a slap. He grappled with the emotional backlash, a mixture of anger and fear spiraling together, fueled by the precariousness of the moment. Yet something deep inside surged forth, igniting a fierce passion. "I'm not just a mechanic. I'm doing something that matters, something that's more than just fixing cars." Brad's laughter erupted, filling the diner as heads swiveled in their direction, a collective audience bearing witness. But Jake couldn't let the laughter drown him. "I'm working on something big, something that might just surprise you." And with those words, an odd sense of relief washed over him. No longer did he feel like a puppet on strings, controlled by Brad's perceptions. He was ready to assert his worth and claim his place, no matter how daunting the battle felt. But just as he thought he had found his footing, the constricting grip of doubt lurked beneath, reminding him that honesty alone wouldn't silence Brad. The struggle to articulate the importance of his dream remained unvoiced while the crowd ebbed and flowed around them. Would his revelation give him the strength to overcome Brad's mockery? Behind that thin veil of bravado, did he have the audacity to reveal his creations, to show the true worth of a mechanic? The answer echoed painfully within his bewildered heart, leaving him hanging between ambition and fear, a true test of his resolve to claim his identity. With a deep breath, he felt the weight of the moment. The question loomed, would he back down or push forward into an unknown territory? The choice was his own, and yet the answer remained tantalizingly out of reach, waiting for the right moment to surface. Jake's heart raced as he absorbed the laughter flooding over him. Each chuckle felt like a stone thrown at his fragile self-worth, and yet he stood there, anchored by a burgeoning sense of purpose. The stakes were higher than ever. It was not just about confronting Brad, but about defining the path he wanted to carve for himself. Sometimes he wondered if that truth was always hidden within him, like repressed sketches waiting to be drawn. "What are you working on, Jake?" came Brad's taunting voice again, raising an eyebrow as if being invited to a punchline in a joke only he could understand. The cafeteria chatter swirled around them, oblivious, and in that moment, Jake felt viscerally isolated, not just from the crowds, but from his own hesitation. He could cling to the moment's energy or allow it to drain him like fuel from a weary engine. He took a step closer, the distance between them collapsing. "It's about more than just the cars I work on, Brad. I'm building something new, a design, something innovative that others might overlook." Brad smiled, a thin line of skepticism etched across his face. "Really? What, a better way to fix dents?" Jake's frustration boiled over. He fought to mold the words that filled the thrumming silence in his mind. In that moment of vulnerability, his thoughts crystallized and scattered. It was terrifying revealing his ambition to a man who had so thoroughly derided him. Yet the gravity of his unshackled dreams pulled him forward. What if I created something that helps even more people than I ever imagined? "Like your grandma's old vacuum," Brad's laughter echoed, but this time, though it stung, Jake didn't flinch. Instead, he saw the crowd differently. Every pair of eyes turned toward him, transformed from judgmental to curious. He knew his dreams were not absurdities. They were blueprints of potential, and the craftsmanship of making things was in his blood. That realization gave him wings. "Actually, it's quite revolutionary. I've been working on a sustainable energy project involving mechanics and art. Imagine combining automotive engineering with creativity to enhance efficiency in vehicles." For the first time, he saw a flicker of something in Brad's eyes, a glimmer of interest or maybe fear. "Sustainable energy? Are you out of your mind? Just because you have a couple of sketches doesn't mean you can change the industry." Jake felt his pulse roaring in his temples, on the cusp of a breakthrough or a collapse. "Brad, abstract designs mean nothing if you don't take the plunge. I've educated myself, researched beyond fixing cars. I deserve this chance to prove that I can do whatever I set my mind to." With each assertion, his voice grew steadier, stripping away the lightweight armor fashioned by fear. As Brad exchanged sarcastic quips with the surrounding onlookers, Jake recognized something deep within. It wasn't just the confrontation. It was a revelation, the notion that standing tall against doubts wasn't simply about reshaping others' perceptions, but an intrinsic growth process fueling his own sense of identity. "Why don't you take a look at my creations? I dare you," he challenged, the hushed silence following his words filling with weighty potential. He wasn't sure what would emerge from the encounter, but a spark had ignited within the depth of his ambition, entrusting him with greater resolve. But despite the rush of adrenaline and newfound confidence, shadows of anxiety lingered. How would he present his work? Would he be able to turn this moment of confrontation into a stepping stone for his aspirations? Beyond the flaccid comedy that Brad imposed lay deeper, raw ambitions. "Why don't you take a look at my creations? I dare you," he challenged, the hushed silence following his words filling with weighty potential. He wasn't sure what would emerge from the encounter, but a spark had ignited within the depth of his ambition, entrusting him with greater resolve. But despite the rush of adrenaline and newfound confidence, shadows of anxiety lingered. How would he present his work? Would he be able to turn this moment of confrontation into a stepping stone for his aspirations? Beyond the flaccid comedy that Brad imposed lay deeper, raw ambitions. Could he really make his father proud, or at least himself, by pushing through the fog of ridicule and doubt. With the inner tension palpable, he sensed a fork in the road. Would he seize this opportunity now, or let it slip away, banished back into the darkness where insecurity reigned? As Jake stood at the precipice of decision, a departure loomed larger in his mind. He was on the verge of unveiling something extraordinary. But first, he needed to confront a truth of his own making, and only then could he gauge the sincerity of the challenge he had just laid down. In that moment, something profound awaited as he pondered. Was he ready to unleash his creations into a world that had long undervalued his craft? The momentum of a weighty ambition perched above him. He could feel it shift, daring him to claim his voice once and for all. What lay ahead would be a test not just against Brad, but against a lifetime of self-doubt. Would he fully embrace his identity, or was the shadow still embedded deep within him? Jake's mind raced as the chatter of the cafeteria resumed its dull hum around him. But the echoes of his confrontation with Brad created an electric backdrop to the ordinary scene. The air was thick with anticipation, not from others, but from within himself. Could he really follow through with this? He knew he had to dig deeper, not just to prove a point to Brad, but to prove something vital to himself. His sketchbook, a comprehensive collection of ideas and designs, felt like a lifeline resting beneath his jacket. He could almost hear the lines calling out to him, urging him to unleash their hidden potential. With each stride toward his next class, his heart tracked an uneven rhythm, oscillating between hope and apprehension. It wasn't enough just to present his work. He needed a way to articulate his vision and get others to see what he saw, to feel the urgency he felt. Just then, an image of his father flashed in his mind, standing proudly by the garage while Jake tinkered with the family car as a child. His father's words echoed through his consciousness. "If you believe in something, you fight for it, son." Jake had spent years fighting this inner battle of self-doubt, but now it seemed the war was at a tipping point. In the dim hallway leading to his next class, he came across a bulletin board filled with flyers for various clubs and events. Among them was an announcement for a local innovation competition with a focus on sustainable solutions. The prize was not only monetary, but also the kind of exposure that could elevate a budding inventor's work to a much-needed platform. His pulse quickened as excitement surged. This wasn't just an opportunity to showcase his designs, but a chance to get feedback, to engage with like-minded individuals who might share his vision. The lingering dread of past ridicule settled uneasily in his stomach. What if he failed? What if his project, the one he had invested countless hours into, crumbled under scrutiny? Jake leaned against the wall, grappling with the weight of that fear. He needed to confront it, to use it as fuel instead of allowing it to extinguish his drive. He closed his eyes, remembering his initial sketches, the potential wheels that could spin not just on asphalt, but in the realm of innovation, blending art and engineering seamlessly. A sudden resolve gripped him, intertwining with that flicker of confidence he had felt earlier. He took a deep breath and decided to seize this chance without reservation. He mustered the courage to pull out his phone and sent a quick message to a mentor from the local community college, a former instructor who had always encouraged his creativity. "Hey, Professor, I hope you're doing well. I'm entering an innovation competition focused on sustainable energy and would love your input on my designs if you have time. Could we meet?" As he pressed send, a sense of empowerment washed over him. He had bypassed his internal rhetoric of defeat, trading it for a programmatic step forward, one that adhered to his newfound commitment to his craft. In the hours following, anticipation hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Jake pored over each detail of his project, refining sketches and notes, his vision becoming clearer by the minute. The act of creation served as his therapy. It chiseled away at the layers of self-doubt he had carried for too long. The next day, he met with his mentor in a small, sunlit cafe. As they discussed the intricacies of his designs, Jake felt the energy in the room shift. The excitement mirrored the hope building within him. His mentor's questions were probing yet encouraging, pushing Jake to dig into the why behind each element of his project. It illuminated the depth of his passion. This was no longer just a design, but a part of who he was becoming. As the discussion unfolded, a sense of clarity emerged. Ideas sparked, and a plan began to take shape. Jake scribbled notes furiously, the momentum of brainstorming feeding his ambition like never before. He could almost taste the success if only he kept moving forward. But just as he felt the thrill of progress, a fleeting recollection of Brad's laughter resurfaced, taunting him like a ghost from the past. Would he be able to withstand the criticism when he finally stepped into the light? The image of submitting his ideas, his heart on display, loomed heavily in his thoughts. It demanded introspection. Jake took a deep breath and reminded himself that every journey requires risk. The potential for rebirth felt too potent to ignore. Now, more than ever, he had a stake in this. The competition was approaching, and it could be pivotal, not just for his designs, but for his entire identity. He could sense the end game more clearly. Success or failure, they would both contribute to his growth. Each pathway was laden with lessons waiting to be learned. As he walked home that evening, the city lights flickered into life, echoing the new flame igniting within him. This would be his transformation, but his own perception of failure had to be addressed. Tomorrow, he would have to venture into the realm of competition, of judgment, and the unyielding energy of a world that could either embrace him or shut him down. Would he see himself as an innovator, capable of change, or would the shadows of the past ultimately confine him? The thought lingered in his mind, urging him forward as he stepped into the darkness, bridging the gap between fear and the undeniable spark of possibility. Jake awoke the next morning with an electric tingle coursing through his veins. The sun pierced through his window, bathing the room in golden light, yet the warmth of the sun felt muted against the storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. Today was the day he would take the plunge, climbing from the shadows of self-doubt into a space of ambition and courage. He stared at his sketchbook on the desk, feeling its weight both as a source of inspiration and dread. Every line he had drawn, every late-night session he had invested, was etched not just on the pages, but deep within him. Today would demand more than just creativity. It would require him to challenge the inner critic that often echoed Brad's voice, the laughter that had once silenced his ambitions. After a quick breakfast, Jake gathered his sketches and notes, a tangible embodiment of his progress. Each design represented a piece of himself, vulnerable yet proud. He glanced in the mirror, taking in the reflection of a young man filled with promise yet trembling with insecurity. Was he prepared to face potential rejection again? It was a question that echoed painfully, but a flicker of determination ignited within him. Arriving at the venue for the competition filled him with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The space was buzzing with energy, and as he stepped inside, it felt as if he was entering another world entirely, one filled with innovators, dreamers, and people who dared to stand in the light. The walls pulsated with creativity, and his heartbeat synced with the hum of ingenuity around him. As he navigated through the crowd, he noticed other competitors showcasing their work, their confidence palpable. A few were engaging in dynamic conversations, bouncing ideas as effortlessly as the sunlight glinted off their polished prototypes. Jake's heart sank momentarily. Doubt began to creep in, planting seeds of comparison in his mind. But he quickly shook it off, remembering the importance of his unique voice in this sea of talent. He positioned himself near his designated area, meticulously setting up his sketches on a simple easel. Each piece resonated with purpose, communicating not only designs, but a vision for a sustainable future. This was his chance, and he needed to engage with the onlookers with clarity and passion rather than shying away, fearing their judgment. As the presentations commenced, Jake watched as competitors before him captivated the audience with their charisma. With every flawless pitch, he felt the pang of anxiety clench tighter around his chest. But when it was finally his turn, a strange calm washed over him. Each step toward the front felt deliberate, a choice rather than a burden. He began presenting, articulating not just the technical aspects of his inventions, but the emotional journey behind them. He shared anecdotes of his father's teachings, of struggling against self-doubt, speaking everything with a blend of vulnerability and conviction that left even him surprised. As he reached the climax of his presentation, something shifted within him. It was no longer about validation or criticism from the audience. It was about sharing his truth, his belief in what he created, and the potential impact it could have. It was liberating. But just as he took his final breath, bringing the presentation to an end, there was an unsettling rustle in the audience. Brad had entered the room, flanked by a few friends. They stood off to the side, laughter and jabs exchanged among them. Jake's heart sank. Would the echo of their derision reach him here? Instead of the sting of fear that normally followed, a spark ignited within him. This was a pivotal moment, not to be defined by their judgment, but to rise above it. He resolutely locked eyes with Brad, allowing the tension to fuel his resolve, while silently promising himself to not let the past dictate his worth. As the judges deliberated, Jake felt an unexpected sense of peace wash over him. Each person present, including him, had embarked on their journey with the shared anticipation of triumph or defeat. He was no longer merely a participant. He had transformed into someone who both sought and embraced growth. However, as the results were announced, Jake's heart drummed with anticipation, not only hoping for endorsement, but praying he wouldn't revert back to the shadows he had fought to escape. When they finally called his name, a wave of disbelief mixed with elation washed over him. Yet just as he stepped forward to accept the recognition, he noticed Brad's glare, icy, defiant. Jake's stomach twisted. The victory felt bittersweet under the weight of that familiar scorn. Would this moment validate his worth in the face of everything he once feared? Or would the old wounds resurface, making him doubt how far he had truly come? As applause echoed in the room, Jake stood at the precipice of exhilaration and doubt, acutely aware that the true battle was far from over. The push toward becoming the person he envisioned was ongoing, one that hinged not only on external achievements, but on his internal landscape. The moment of clarity crashed over him. His heart, unshackled, had begun to thrive, yet the bitterness of old memories lingered. Could he embrace this victory while confronting the toxic remnants of doubt? The answer loomed on the horizon of his journey, beckoning him to reflect on what remained at stake. As he exited the stage, Jake realized this was just the beginning. Tomorrow would demand more courage and deeper reflection. And as he faced the applause, he asked himself the hardest question yet. What path would he choose now, following this moment of triumph? Jake stood off to the side of the stage, the spotlight fading behind him as the noise of congratulatory chatter enveloped the hall. He felt the prize in his hands, a tangible representation of effort. But it didn't ease the tension knotting his stomach. Instead, it provoked a deeper worry. How do you truly celebrate a victory when shadows from the past still loomed large? Tension pulsed through him, heavier than the applause. Brad's eyes burned into his back, a reminder of every failure and every moment lost to doubt. As the crowd began to disperse, Jake took a breath, reeling at the audacity of his conflict. He had earned this recognition, but Brad's presence, with all its baggage, had turned a moment of triumph into an intricate tapestry of emotions. Outside the venue, the cool air hit Jake's face like a slap, in contrast to the warmth he had just felt from the audience. He needed a moment to think, to process how far he had come, without letting the ghost of his past overshadow the path ahead. Among the cacophony of music and laughter spilling from nearby cafes, Jake closed his eyes, grappling with the duality of victory and vulnerability. What did winning mean if he couldn't shake off the remnants of old insecurities? He walked slowly under the twinkling city lights, seeking clarity among the shadows. The streets pulsed with life. He observed families strolling, couples giggling, individuals lost in their worlds. Their joy felt like a distant echo of something he, too, had yearned for. A genuine sense of belonging and acceptance. Each step felt laden with purpose. Jake found a bench and sat down, inhaling deeply, reflecting on the dialogue he had with himself just moments before. He thought about how often he had allowed fear to dictate his choices. Today had been the antithesis of that, his own voice breaking free against the relentless tide of self-doubt. But could he sustain this newfound courage beyond the applause? The thought felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The confrontation with Brad had ignited something dormant within him, a resolve to break chains forged from toxic validation. Yet in that confrontation, he felt a relentless nagging, an undesirable need for closure. What would it take to reclaim those years spent deferential to the whims of others? Jake pulled out his sketchbook, a safety net, and flipped through his designs. It wasn't just the words coming from her lips, but the way her eyes sparkled with conviction, beckoning. With a deep breath, fueled by the urgency of his own burgeoning resolve, Jake maneuvered through tables, each step a reminder of his determination to connect, to bridge the gap between his vulnerabilities and their overflowing joy. When he reached the group, he hesitated, a familiar wave of doubt crashing over him. What could he possibly add to their deep exchange? Yet something inside him whispered that he needed to take that step. "Hey," he interjected, his voice surprisingly steady. "I couldn't help but overhear. It sounds like you're talking about overcoming challenges." The woman turned to him, recognition flashing across her face. "Absolutely. We were just discussing how facing our fears is essential for growth. It can spark connection in unexpected ways." Jake's heart raced, resonating with her enthusiasm. This was the very essence of his own journey, the intermingling of fear and a yearning to connect. The conversation turned, and he found himself sharing snippets of his own struggles, how doubts had once overshadowed his dreams, and how that recognition had fueled his recent victory. To his surprise, the group listened intently, nodding as he laid bare pieces of his past. As he spoke, a strange liberation washed over him. For the first time, these seemingly trivial moments of vulnerability felt powerful, almost transformative. He recognized a shared thread among them. Each person battled their own demons. Their scars marked hard-fought journeys. One member of the group, an older man with a kind smile, leaned forward. "It's a process, isn't it? Learning to balance those vulnerabilities with our strengths. We often think we're alone, but when we share, it becomes clear how interconnected our fears are." Jake met the man's gaze, feeling a surge of affirmation. The connection deepened as they exchanged stories, discomfort slowly replaced by camaraderie. He understood that stepping into his truth was a way to illuminate not just his path, but that of others tangled in their own narratives. "This is just the beginning for me," Jake confessed, more to himself than anyone. "I want to turn these experiences into something that empowers others." The woman who had sparked the conversation smiled warmly, as though she saw beyond his words. "That's incredible, Jake. Your journey could truly resonate. Have you thought about how to share that story more broadly?" That question ignited something in him, a revelation that he'd barely begun to grasp. He hadn't only won that award, he had unlocked a responsibility to advocate for those still wrestling with self-doubt and fear. With this thought circling in his mind, the cafe around him began to fade. The laughter and chatter turned into background melodies, a soundtrack underscoring a new clarity that surged through him. "I want to write about not just my successes, but the journey, the struggles, that raw human experience," he declared, as much for himself as for the group. As they encouraged him, ideas buzzed and suggestions spiraled forth, each more exciting than the last. The conversation flowed, and every shared word built more determination within him. But beneath all this excitement lurked a deeper challenge. He could feel it gnawing at the edges of this newfound motivation. With every casual laugh and encouraging nod, he became acutely aware of Brad's looming influence still waiting in the shadows of his mind, as if the phantom of his past wanted to remind him of the hurdles still ahead. How could he transform this moment into sustainable action, one where he resisted the lure of past insecurities? As the night stretched on and the group began to disperse, Jake felt an unshakable commitment forming, a commitment to pursue this next phase. Leaving the cafe, emboldened by new connections, but haunted by questions, he lingered outside, feeling the rush of cool air re-energize him. What more would he discover in opening up his narrative? What conversations awaited him on this path toward empowerment? What would it truly mean to confront the specter of his past, represented by Brad, as he stepped into a new role of vulnerability into strength? Jake's pulse quickened at the thought. The journey ahead promised discovery, but the challenge to face what lurked in his own heart remained. Taking a decisive step forward, he wondered whether this newfound courage would carry him over the threshold of transformation, or if the shadows would grab hold once more when he least expected it. The following morning, the world felt different. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the room and revealing dust motes dancing in the air. It felt like a fresh start, yet Jake also sensed the weight of expectations building in the corners of his mind. An early morning jog through the neighborhood was supposed to clear his head, but with every footfall, he felt that familiar tangle of thoughts creeping back in. As he ran, he reflected on yesterday's encounter at the cafe. The warmth of connection stirred excitement within him, yet shadows of doubt whispered that this newly formed revelation was as transient as the morning mist. Could he truly share his story? Could his voice, a voice battered by years of self-doubt, carry enough weight to spark change in others? Those thoughts quickened his pace until he was breathless at the edge of the park. The familiar route to the little brook felt different today. A crowd had gathered, families with children, laughter and shouts mingling like music. A part of him longed to join, to immerse himself in such genuine joy. But another part remained pinned down, tethered to his own fears. He sat on a bench overlooking the brook, holding back thoughts of Brad, the man who had often shrouded his victories with scrutiny. Those words, a memory of confrontation, stung like fresh wounds. The way Brad had belittled his achievements seemed to echo in his ears, and Jake felt the anger rekindle. How could he emerge when past humiliations chained him to experiences that felt hollow? A noise broke his internal monologue. A little boy had tripped while playing with a group. Instinctively, Jake stood and rushed over, his protective nature surfacing. The boy brushed dirt from his knees, blinking back tears while his friends hovered anxiously around him. Jake kneeled down, lowering his voice. "Hey, you all right?" The boy nodded. "I thought it would be fun, but now I feel dumb." Testing his new resolve, Jake shared a piece of his own childhood, a time he'd stumbled on stage during a school play. "I felt so embarrassed too, but you know what? That was just a moment, and moments can change." The boy looked up, intrigue replacing sadness. "Really? What happened next?" "It taught me to laugh at myself. Every time I fell, I learned to get back up. And every time I got back up, I got a little stronger." As he spoke, Jake felt the weight of his narrative shift. Perhaps sharing wasn't just for an audience. Perhaps it was for these moments with individual hearts. That genuine connection was something he yearned for, something that painted his past interactions in a new light. When the boy bolted back to his friends, laughter swirled around him. Jake watched, a tight knot of purpose forming. Suddenly, he felt a pull towards getting his message out. This moment of connecting through vulnerability could be the start of something more substantial. But still, those niggling doubts about sharing a broader story loomed. How would he transform moments of vulnerability into the narrative he envisioned? His thoughts spiraled. He had to write. He had to engage more with those who felt like him, who carried burdens silently. But did he have the strength to challenge the dismissive echo of Brad? The mere thought of confronting Brad again made him shiver inside. As he made his way back home, an idea bloomed. He could draft an essay about his childhood struggles to submit to a local magazine, something that encouraged personal stories. Would it serve as a stepping stone to face his past? With each stride, conviction fortified his resolve. Creativity shot through him like electricity. It wasn't just writing for the sake of expression, it was a form of defiance, an assertion that he would no longer be defined by past humiliations. Jake quickened his pace again, envisioning the lines of his essay taking shape, the clarity of vulnerability breathing fire into his words. But what if the mere act of putting pen to paper unlocked even deeper fears about confrontation, more personal than he anticipated? Would Brad's shadow loom large over this unfolding chapter of his life? Uncertainty thrummed beneath his excitement. Yet beneath this cycle of doubt and ambition, he felt something unfamiliar stirring, a determination to reclaim his narrative, no matter how daunting the task might seem. As he reached his front door, a fresh resolve bloomed within him. The way forward was still murky, but the path couldn't be clear without taking the next necessary step, one rooted in courage. He inhaled deeply, heart pounding in anticipation of the unfolding possibilities. What would happen when he faced these truths and tapped into the underlying complexities of his own narrative? Would he find the strength to confront not only Brad, but his own doubts as he wrote his story? The next morning, Jake sat at his kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee in hand, reviewing notes for the essay he intended to write. Each word felt like a stepping stone, leading him deeper into his own psyche. The sun spilled light through the window, warming his face, but the trepidation curled in the pit of his stomach proved an unforgiving contrast. Today was the day he would confront his past, and while the thought made him nervous, it also ignited an ember of overdue courage. He stared at a blank notepad, the stark whiteness staring back at him as if questioning his resolve. Where to begin? Images of his childhood, the awkward moments, the clumsy setbacks, flooded his thoughts. They had long festered in the recesses of his mind, sometimes surfacing in unexpected waves. There was power in those memories, he reminded himself. Each moment shaped him, even the one shadowed by embarrassment. As the caffeine worked its way through him, an unexpected memory arose. That birthday party when he was 10, he had been so proud of the superhero costume his mother made. But as the kids laughed and jeered when he tripped over the garden hose, the laughter had twisted into a cruel chorus echoing through his mind. "Why did I think I could fly?" echoed the voice of self-doubt. Shaking his head, he scrawled, "Embracing vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness." He paused. The phrase resonated with a truth he longed to internalize. Could that be the foundation of his essay? He jotted down points, weaving in the connection between vulnerability and resilience. Each line felt exhilarating. Perhaps this was more than just a story. It was an exploration of his own transformation. With each passing hour, the fears began to shift from monsters looming in the shadows to tangible hurdles he could tackle. There was a clarity in focusing on the vulnerable moments he had long avoided. What was it that truly held him back? He felt the presence of Brad, his former tormentor, lurking in the margins of his mind. But today, Jake was armed with a newfound conviction. He wasn't simply a victim of Brad's ridicule anymore. He was the author of his own narrative. An idea took root, drawing parallels between childhood mishaps and adult ambivalence. He recalled the little boy from the park, wiping tears away, and the courage it took to assure him that setbacks are merely stepping stones. Realization dawned on him. By sharing his story, he not only transformed his childhood events, but also could inspire others. If he could embrace his own story, maybe others could muster the courage to do the same. Yet doubt still knocked at his door. What if this raw honesty drew unwanted scrutiny? What would Brad think? Suddenly, Jake remembered the warmth of the boy's smile when he spoke of those moments and the empowerment they generated. Each word felt alive, echoing the laughter he yearned to embrace again. As he typed the first sentences onto his laptop, they flowed like water breaking through a dam. Each keystroke rendered a small piece of his hesitance into the digital ether. He envisioned sending this essay out, a possibility to reach someone who needed reassurance that they too weren't alone in their struggles. Would it reach the heart of another child lost in his own cycle of embarrassment or fear? The day melted into evening, and with the sun setting behind him, a profound sense of purpose enveloped him. The fear that had once felt suffocating began to seem manageable, and he could finally see the contours of victory over his inner adversaries. But victory elicited more questions. How would he handle the deeper confrontation with Brad when the time came? The looming reality of facing his childhood tormentor felt both exhilarating and terrifying. As Jake sat back, reflecting on the progress he made, an uneasy thought crept in. What if confronting Brad would drag him back into a familiar cycle of self-doubt? Was he truly ready for that confrontation? With a thrilling sense of dread twisting in his gut, he recognized the next steps would not only encompass writing, but preparing to reclaim every lost piece of his self-worth. And as he pressed save on his document, he pondered what those very next steps would look like. Would they propel him toward true empowerment or unravel the fragile thread of confidence he had just woven? The moment of confrontation with Brad loomed ever closer. How would he face the demons that once divined found him? Jake stood at the threshold of his journey, poised to embrace the breakthroughs that had begun reshaping his life. The sun's rays spilled through his window, casting a golden glow over the sketches adorning his desk. Each one was a testament to his progress. Each line drawn with purpose was an echo of a man reclaiming his narrative from the shadows of self-doubt. Today was more than just another day. It was the day he would confront Brad once and for all. The tension bubbled within him as he prepared for the confrontation. He could hardly believe how far he had come since that humiliating moment at Liam's birthday party. The once laughable barbs of Brad no longer held power over him. Instead, they had ignited a flame of determination, driving him to uncover his true passion for automotive design, a passion rooted in familial legacy. Everything he had worked for was about to manifest in a much more significant way. He took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of confidence he had cultivated through his creativity and hard work. It was time to turn the page and step into the bright light of recognition that awaited him. Jake had dedicated countless hours to his sustainable energy project. each day inching him closer to embracing the identity he always wanted. Today was also the day he intended to share his latest designs at a local Innovators Expo, an event bustling with individuals eager to make their mark on the world. He had finally taken the leap and submitted his essay, chronicling his journey through vulnerability to empowerment. It was a raw and honest exploration of a man learning to fight against mockery and embrace his voice. As he approached the expo hall, the atmosphere thrummed with novelty and creativity. A sense of excitement enveloped him. His nerves began to dissipate as he recalled advice from his mentor. Embracing vulnerability not only meant revealing his weaknesses, but also acknowledging the strength it took to turn those weaknesses into stepping stones. When he stepped inside, the room vibrated with conversations, laughter, and presentation pitches swirling with energy. And there, in the corner, stood Brad with his usual entourage, looking as lavishly out of touch as ever. Jake's heart raced, but instead of faltering, a determined fire ignited within him. He couldn't let fear derail his progress. "Here goes nothing," he murmured to himself, heading towards his designated exhibition space. The moment felt electric, charged with the possibility of transformation. He methodically arranged his sketches, ensuring every detail was showcased, every revision that signified his growth as an innovator. As judges wandered by, he engaged them with enthusiasm, explaining the intricacies of his designs. Jake remembered his own fears and vulnerabilities, channeling that energy into powerful communication, each word resonating with newfound confidence. He offered not just mechanics, but visions for sustainability, intertwining mechanics with artistry, a concept born from personal struggle and triumphs. In the corner of his eye, he noticed Brad's disbelief morph into ridicule as he leaned toward a companion, gesturing dismissively. "Can you believe he thinks he can change the industry?" Brad scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. But instead of crumbling, Jake's resolve solidified. The truth had erupted within him. He could not allow the negativity of others to define his journey. "This is who I am," he silently affirmed, drawing energy from within. The audience, sensing his determination, began to gather, curiosity piqued by the authenticity seeping from his presentation. Confidence surged like a wave, monumental and uplifting, as he humorously detailed how breaking a few tools in his early days had taught him resilience, enabling him to create something more than just repairs. Then came the moment he had been preparing for, the confrontation. Jake stepped closer to Brad, heart racing yet steady. "Brad," he called out, capturing the attention of others nearby, "I see you chose to come watch even after everything." Brad paused, confusion dancing in his eyes. "What are you doing, Jake? You honestly think your little project matters?" With fervor thrumming in his chest, Jake met Brad's gaze. "It matters to me. This isn't just a project. This is my legacy. I'm aimed at something bigger, something that pushes boundaries. People can doubt my journey, but they won't take my voice away again." For a moment, silence slipped over the room, and in that precious second, Jake felt liberated. He wasn't just a mechanic any longer. He was an innovator, redefining the rules, shaking the foundation of his self-perception. Brad's bravado wavered. Perhaps for the first time, he felt an echoing crunch in his facade. "You'll see, nothing will change," Brad scoffed, but his voice faltered under the weight of Jake's newfound self-assurance. Jake smiled, returning to his exhibition with a sense of validation. The audience began to show genuine interest, engaging him in inquiries about sustainable solutions, dimensions of innovation that resonated beyond mere aesthetics. After the presentations concluded, people approached him, eager to discuss collaboration ideas and sponsorships. The buzz escalated, and Jake reveled in the newfound freedom within his spirit. He had confronted not just Brad, but the very limits he had imposed on himself. As conversations flowed effortlessly, Brad faded to the background, a distant memory of past insecurities. Each handshake, each nod of agreement was an affirmation that solidified Jake's transformation. He had proven, not only to others, but to himself, that he was worthy of acknowledgement and respect. At the end of the day, as the expo hall began to empty, Jake held his sketches close. The shadows of doubt had receded. Self-empowerment had taken its rightful place in his narrative. He was ready to embrace the journey ahead, fully aware that each hurdle conquered would only deepen his resolve. This wasn't simply a victory of the day, but one for a lifetime. The horizon shimmered with promise. He had achieved not only recognition, but an established identity. As he stepped outside, the sun dipped low, and he knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter, defined by courage, creativity, and unwavering confidence. The urgency surged through him. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Today, he wasn't just transforming his journey. He was set on lighting a path that would carve through the fog of self-doubt for others, too. Don't wait even one more second to click that subscribe button. You need to stay updated with these exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now. It fuels the passion for more inspiring content. Share this journey with at least 5 friends who need to witness this victory, and comment your thoughts, because only true fans understand the importance of supporting the mission and growth we're all achieving together.